Welcome to Voices of Bodybuilding, the first, at least I think it's the first, audio magazine devoted to fitness and bodybuilding. Voices in bodybuilding? Voices of bodybuilding? I haven't really decided what I'm going to call it. I think Voices of Bodybuilding makes more sense, but we'll figure that out as we go along. I detest long introductions. That's why, as you've just heard, I have no big produced musical intro. On my podcast, we get right into things. However, this being the premiere episode of Voices of Bodybuilding, I think a little explanation of what we're going to be doing is in order. I want you to think of the Voices of Bodybuilding podcast like an audio magazine. That means each week I will collect articles from all over, controversial topics, inspirational stories, instructional articles, and a few random surprises that will hopefully entertain and expand your mind. This is a podcast for those who are interested in fitness and or bodybuilding, but who don't enjoy reading or don't have the time. I will be looking for existing content across the internet and in magazines, as well as soliciting original material. So if you'd like me to consider your article, please send it to mike@mikepulcinella.com and be sure to let me know what your qualifications are for presenting the information. You never know, your piece might end up on a future episode of Voices of Bodybuilding. So each episode of the podcast will have several sections. First will be the intro, where I just sort of lay out what we're going to be talking about. And then I'm going to have an article about fitness from the fitness world, just anything related to fitness and health, sort of a general fitness article. Then the next section is going to be a more in-depth, what we call hardcore bodybuilding article. For the next segment, my brother Dave will show up and we will talk about a topic that he's going to introduce. Now, Dave was the subject of my first documentary and is a 30-year veteran of bodybuilding and fitness, and he's a personal trainer, so he has a lot of knowledge that he's bringing with him. And finally, at the end, we'll have what I call the off-topic article. It'll be something hopefully related to the world of fitness and bodybuilding, like the one I'll be reading today is definitely related in some way, but it may not be. It may be just something that interests me that I think will interest you, something inspiring, something just out of left field that you may not have been aware of or thought of, and something I can bring to your attention and maybe point you in a new direction or open your mind in a different way or just make you think about a topic a little bit differently. And now, because we live in a litigious society, a quick legal disclaimer. The views expressed in the articles are obviously the opinions of the writers and not me. I make no claims for the veracity of the information presented, so use your head and check these things out for yourself before trying anything you hear about on VOB. And if you've never exercised before, get started. It's never too late, but be sure to check with your doctor first to see if everything is okay, which you should be doing every year anyway. So now that we have that out of the way, let's get started. This week on Voices of Bodybuilding, in the fitness section, a piece from health.com that describes a study that seems to show that we don't need to lift heavy weights to build muscle. From the world of bodybuilding, a piece on the ever controversial topic of steroids by my friend Carl Lanore of Superhuman Radio. Then my brother Dave shows up to talk about Oprah Winfrey's latest Weight Watchers commercial. And finally, for our off-topic article, an excerpt of a commencement speech given by the writer David Foster Wallace, which I think may hit home with many of you who obsess a little too much about your bodies. This first article is called No Need to Lift Heavy Weights to Build Muscle, Study Finds by Jordan Smith, originally written for health.com. And the reason it came to my attention was because I'm 55 years old now and I'm still working out 5 or 6 days a week and trying to stay in shape. And I've really noticed the wear and tear on my joints. And so I've started using lighter weights, higher repetitions, and being very, very careful about my extension and contraction. And I'm finding that I'm getting just as sore, and I so far seem to be staying in as good shape as I was before when I was trying to lift heavy. So I really think that for young or old, this is some good advice to work out lighter and protect your joints. And now with this article and this study, it's backed up by science that you can do just as well gaining muscle and size and all that sort of thing. If you're looking to build muscle, but worry about overdoing it with the barbells, here is some encouraging news. Research shows that, contrary to popular belief, lifting lighter weights for more reps can be just as effective as lifting heavier weights for fewer reps. For the study, published in the Journal of Applied Physiology, researchers from McMaster University followed 49 young men over the course of a 12-week full body resistance training program. About half the participants used lighter weights for sets ranging from 20 to 25 repetitions. Each person's weights were set at 30 to 50% of his one repetition maximum, or the amount he could lift one time. The other half lifted heavier weights, set at about 75 to 90% of each man's one rep max, for sets ranging from 8 to 12 reps. Both groups worked until the point of fatigue. What the researchers found was that the gains in muscular strength and size among participants in the first and second groups were not significantly different. Quote, "This research is significant because it challenges current resistance exercise dogma and guidelines," says study author Robert W. Morton, a PhD candidate at the McMaster University. Quote, "Put simply, your effort is more important than the weight you use." Ideally, he says, the findings will motivate more people to take up resistance exercise, quote, "particularly those who have been intimidated by the need to train with heavy weights," he says. So go ahead and grab whatever set of dumbbells you please, as long as you keep up the reps until you can't do any more. If you'd like to check out the original research paper, and I recommend that you always do in cases like this to see what the actual research says, you can go to the Journal of Applied Physiology website, jap.physiology.org, and look for the article called "Neither Load Nor Systemic Hormones Determine Resistance Training Mediated Hypertrophy or Strength Gains in Resistance-Trained Young Men." Wow, that's a really catchy title. Carl Lanore is the host of the long-running podcast Superhuman Radio, which can be found at superhumanradio.com. He's also an excellent writer. The main thrust of his podcast is anti-aging, but Carl has been known to delve into many fitness and bodybuilding-related topics. Recently, I created a short video that made a controversial point about steroids. You can check it out on my Mike Pulcinella YouTube page. It's called "Why Using Steroids Isn't Cheating," parentheses, in bodybuilding. Well, I thought that this article dovetailed nicely with my video and expanded on my idea. So here we go. It's called "You Got That Body by Gear" by Carl Lanore. I recently saw a post on Facebook depicting a video of some very hard-working, muscular women. A particular comment caught my eye. The poster simply posted the word "gear." This post angered me, but I have to go back to 2008 in order to understand why. Back during the Anabolic Steroid Control Act hearings in front of Congress, then Senator Joe Biden complained that he wanted to become a pro baseball player, but was convinced that every athlete that outperformed him was using performance-enhancing drugs. Even though he had no proof of this, he told Congress that his inability to make it as a pro was directly tied to his unwillingness to use drugs. This assumption by then Senator Biden is a slap in the face to every hardworking athlete in the world. To simply reduce his or her ability to make it as a pro to drug use, and having nothing to do with hard work, genetics, dedication, learning, strict nutrition, and so much more that goes into becoming the 0.1% that makes it to the top. Be honest, Biden just didn't have it, and with drugs he still wouldn't have had it. Blaming drug use for someone's success in any sport is disingenuous and corrosive to the will and hard work that drives accomplishments, and to the mechanisms that beget success. Fast forward to this January 2017 and the Facebook video. So this guy, who's an author of a training style that clearly doesn't get very good results, I was originally going to name him but then decided not to call him out in the article. He posted one single word on the video post of the muscular, hard-working girl. gear. There it was again, just like Biden, reducing all the hard work, learning, dedication that most likely she applied for years, if not decades, down to just one thing: drug use. This is unfair, but more importantly, patently untrue. In fact, when someone posts the word gear or comments that some hardworking athlete's physique or strength can only be attributed to drug use and not hard work and dedication over the course of years, what they are really saying is, I don't have what it takes, so I'll just crap on your hard work. In many cases, the athletes who are accused of using drugs simply aren't. This is a horrible place to be. To be unfairly accused can rot one from the inside out. But let's look at how unfair this accusation is to the drug-using athlete as well. Every sport in history has progressed from where it first began. Screaming gear is like screaming cleats when a baseball player slides into home plate, trying to imply that his acquired speed and agility is somehow overshadowed by the technological edge that wearing cleats provides. Cleats don't make you fast. Hard work and practice does that. And gear doesn't make you strong and doesn't reshape your body. Hard work and practice does that. If you doubt what I'm saying, then let's play a little critical thinking game. What's the strongest anabolic steroid that imparts strength to its user? My guess is trenbolone, and I think most would agree. Okay, so here's the experiment. You take the highest doses of trenbolone possible and then go deadlift. So will you pull the 1,102 pounds Eddie Hall did to break records? No? Okay, will you pull 100% more than you normally can? Of course not. Now back to cleats. If you learn to run in cleats and practice for years and years, will you be able to run faster in cleats than smooth-soled running shoes? Absolutely. So is it the cleats or the hard work and practice while wearing cleats? Will using performance-enhancing drugs while training with dedication and specificity enhance your outcome? Yes. But you still have to do the hard work over the course of years. Louis Simmons was once quoted about this topic as saying, "I've never seen a bottle of testosterone lift 1,000 pounds. And while his comment is overly simplistic and far-fetched, the point is made. I don't see anyone posting Humira when Phil Mickelson wins a golf tournament. Humira is a performance-enhancing drug in his case. He couldn't golf as well as he does without it. Ergo, it enhances his performance." Commenting gear on a post about the results of a clearly hardworking, dedicated athlete says a lot more about you than it does about the athlete you're trying to diminish. It doesn't say you have higher standards or morals. It says you don't have what it takes. Not that taking drugs is what it takes. You're trying to diminish another person's hard work and dedication and attempt to reduce it to just drug use alone. You hate the idea that only those who gutted it out to get what they want got what they wanted. You feel that you should get what you want, even though you're not willing to do the hard work and sacrifice. It's funny, but I never see athletes post gear under pictures or videos of other athletes who surpass their own progress and accomplishments. It's always the guy who looks like he barely trains or eats like crap. Athletes know, whether they're using drugs or not, that it still takes decades of hard work, sacrifice, up early while others are sleeping, food prep while others are watching TV, skipping dessert on Thanksgiving, 10 years in a row. Admit it. Just like Joe Biden, you just don't have the burning desire to go and get it, so you just want to crap on everyone else who does. And you just can't face the truth, so you have to blame your lack of dedication and hard work on something outside of yourself. Maybe the truth is, you just don't want it that bad. So here's my suggestion. Next time you see someone's post depicting the results of their hard work, instead of posting gear, try posting good work. And perhaps, just perhaps, when you start giving credit where credit is due, you'll find your own fire and passion to go and get your own dreams come alive. So for the next segment of Voices of Bodybuilding, I invite my brother Dave to join me here. Dave and I have worked together on Racing the Bar, obviously, if you're familiar with our documentaries, and I figured that now would be a good time to get him to weigh in on some of the things we've been talking about in Voices of Bodybuilding. So, Dave, are you there?
Yeah.
How'd you like that intro?
It's great, but I'm just going to warn you.
What?
I'm a week and a half out of major surgery.
Well, why don't we start by, maybe for people who have followed you from the First Callout and other things, right. Why don't we catch people up on actually what's happening with you right now? Okay,
well, the main thing, I mean, the most notable thing, obviously, at least for me, is what's happened with my knees in the past 6 months, with both of them. I know it's not unheard of. It's not, it doesn't never happen, but what happened to me is extremely rare. And I am hyped up on some pain meds right now, so I'm just warning you right now. Which may or may be a good thing, because if you remember, when we did the First Callout, I was sometimes drinking some wine and maybe had a Vicodin in me, and it worked out pretty well.
Those were always the best ones.
Those were the best ones. And then there was the time I took an Ambien and just let it see what it did while I was talking. That was really good. I passed out with my head on the keyboard.
I was going to say, you blacked out on that one, didn't you?
I think I blacked out on that one. So, yeah, at the end of June, I completely tore my quad muscle.
And, of course, how did you do that? People would ask, probably.
Yeah, the story's not that great.
Was squatting 1,000 pounds, something like that?
I wish, and if you really look into it, the bodybuilders who tear their quads or tear their this or tear their that, especially the quad tear, it's usually something not in the gym. And for me, it was simply getting out of a chair. A low chair, I twisted the wrong way. My knee was perhaps bent a little too much, and I put all the weight on the one leg. And I'm sure there was an element of it was ready to go. I'm sure the tendon was very brittle and was weak.
Did you feel like it was ready to go?
Well, I had been having knee problems for a long time, and I actually stopped doing legs because I was just having too many knee issues as far as pain in the general area of both knees. So I had gone to the doctor, and I had gotten that PRP, platelet replacement. I forget what it stands for. PRP, I think it is.
Google it.
Right now?
No, not you. I'm talking to the audience.
Oh, Google it, audience. Anyway, so what they do is they take your blood out, they spin all the platelets out, they inject it back in. It's supposed to have a healing property in terms of your connective tissue in your knees. And it's supposed to bring it back. You can use it in your shoulders, your elbows, whatever.
Right.
So I had that done to both knees, and it didn't do much. I still had a lot of pain. So obviously something was at play there. The connective tissue was obviously worn down. It didn't show up on an MRI. Everything looked normal on an MRI and an X-ray, which was deceiving, which is really weird.
Weird.
So the doctors had no idea that it was going to do this, but when I went to stand up, it was, I think, June 28th it was, full quad tear in the right knee, in the right leg, which was obviously a major reattachment surgery and 6 months of recovery, which I had just completed, full with PT and everything.
When that happened,
yeah,
can you describe what it felt like?
It's a weird sensation because it doesn't hurt at very first.
Weird.
The sensation is sickening because it is an audible, very loud pop.
Oh, God.
And it's a pop / crunching sound at the same time. It's exactly what you would expect what's happening to sound like. You know what I mean? And then you look down, and what you initially see is just horrific because nothing looks like it's supposed to.
Right.
So in an instant, you go from having a regular, normal, functional leg to hearing this gut-wrenching sound, to looking down and seeing your kneecap hanging off the side. There's a big gap between your knee and where the quad begins. And you can't straighten the leg or bend it. You can't move it. You can't move your body.
Right.
You can't do anything other than lay there and wait for the ambulance to get there.
When does the pain kick in?
It's funny too, because I remember recording myself in the ambulance on the way to the ER, and I'm joking and filming my knee and saying, on the way to the ER, haha. So obviously I was in shock or was not in that much pain. The real pain happens when the swelling begins,
right.
and that doesn't happen for 24 hours. So by the next day, your leg is swollen to twice the size that it was. That really brings on the pain.
You know, that's like in the movies, there's this cliche of when someone is stabbed or shot or something traumatic happens to their body, they scream in pain because it's so dramatic. But the truth of the matter is, things like that, you don't really react to it much. You don't feel it. And it is the recovery where the real pain comes in.
I screamed when it happened.
Really? Just out of shock?
I screamed out of sheer horror. And then the second time, which... let's get into this now.
Okay. So wait, you had a first time, and you've been through the recovery. You were.
Oh yeah, I had the surgery on July 1st.
Right.
This past July 1st.
Rehab, the painful rehab, the bending of the knee.
Therapy, the bending of the knee, every day trying to get in there and do a little bit more, strengthen it. The TENS units on there, and
walking on crutches at first, having that.
I was in a walker. I was in a walker for a long time. So I was trying to go to work and satisfy my customers and be in my office. And then every time I have to go to the bathroom, I have to walk the entire length of the gym with a walker, which is very humiliating. So I did that was like 3 months, and then crutches for another month, and then, just the immobilizer, and then finally, just limping for another few months. And then the whole thing took about 6 months.
Okay.
Before I was actually able to use that leg again. And then I had just done my first leg workout that included walking lunges with body weight, just with body weight.
Wow.
Recently, 3 weeks ago.
And it felt good.
It felt good. I had brought the leg back. It was functional. It doesn't look too pretty. It's got a big old scar down it. And the muscles are still atrophied. You have to bring them back, They've been doing nothing for so long that they go away. They disappear.
Right.
So, cut to 2 Saturdays ago, I was dropping some brochures off at a friend's house. Now, they have a dog that is known to be less than friendly.
I heard it was a rescue dog that was
a rescue dog.
Possibly mistreated.
Yeah, that's what I heard as well. I had never met the dog because every time I was at the house, it was away in the cage. Mm-hmm. However, this time I went there, I knocked on the door, and their 20-year-old daughter answered, and she didn't put the dog away. I don't know, she just didn't think to do that.
Right.
Well, the dog lunged out of the doorway and lunged at me, knocked me backwards and sideways. I fell backwards and sideways at the same time, is what I remember. And then I heard that all too familiar pop/crunch again. And I knew immediately what had happened.
Did you have any warning that the dog was going to attack you like that?
No. I had no idea the dog was going to be there.
Oh, my God. And where's Kayla throughout all of this?
She was driving, so she had pulled into the driveway. And she was in the driveway, strapped in her seatbelt. And she watched this whole thing happen, to her horror.
Oh, my God.
And she knew when I fell and screamed exactly what had happened. She knew exactly what had happened.
At this point, did the girl pull the dog off of you?
I honestly don't remember. I remember falling. I remember looking down at my leg and seeing it all mangled again. Mm-hmm. And I just started screaming in desperation and anger. I was just laying on the ground going, fuck, no, not again, and holding my knee. Not again, I can't go through this again. And I'm sure the girl thought I was insane.
Right.
She had no idea. First of all, just looking at me, you don't see any blood, you don't see any abrasions, you don't see any cuts. You saw the dog knocked me down, obviously.
Right.
But as far as she's concerned, she doesn't know what's going on. Why am I screaming like that? What am I talking about? Going through what again?
Right.
I mean, he's holding his knee, but there's nothing wrong with it, apparently. Because she couldn't see. I had shorts on, right?
Right.
So God only knows what she thought. But Kayla knew immediately what it was. And I, in that instant that had happened, knew everything I had to go through again for 6 months on the other leg. And now here I am. The surgery was last Thursday.
Okay.
So how far out are we? Like a week and a couple, like 9 days?
Yeah.
So 10 days. pain is awful. The swelling's awful. I still have staples in it. I'm going to get the staples removed Friday. I have not been in the office. I have not been able to work.
When does the therapy begin again?
Well, they're probably going to tell me Friday. When they take the staples out, he's probably going to tell me exactly when that starts. And it's going to be really rough.
Well, the good news is now both legs are fixed and you're going to be better than ever, right?
Well, that's on paper, yeah. I mean, they don't ever look the same. And to be honest with you, the function, I don't know, man, at this point.
Yeah.
The first one, I mean, we're 6 months out from that. And the function's pretty good, but it doesn't feel the same. And I don't know that it ever will, which is fine. I want to be able to walk. I want to be able to do light legs. I want to be able to exercise. I want to be able to live a normal life. And I think that will happen. But this is rough. And then now I started to look into this. You know, I'm not the only one this has happened to.
I've noticed that. It's almost like an epidemic.
It really is. You know, Evan Centopani.
Centopani, that's the one. And Ron Partlow. And you go all the way back to Victor Martinez, who, by the way, I was in a car with Victor Martinez talking about you recently, and I told him this story. And, this happened to one of Victor's legs. And, the upside of that is he went on to compete at the Olympia, maybe not win, but compete, at high-level bodybuilding after this operation.
Right. Yeah.
And I mentioned that to him. I said, so you're pretty good. He goes, yeah, but the other one, he says, I can feel it.
Yeah.
I can feel it. He says, I'm being so careful.
It's going to go.
He says, but I can feel it.
It's going to go.
It's right on the edge.
And I'll tell you this, if that dog hadn't done that, and it's easy to say, oh, damn, that dog, but it would have gone somewhere else.
Yeah, probably.
I mean, at some point, dude, with me doing leg presses or lunges or something.
Right.
Because if it was as delicate, which you have to assume this is the case, if it was as delicate as the right one was when it went, and it went for me standing up. Right. The left one would have gone doing something in the gym, or if I slipped or something. It was inevitable.
So is this really just the effect of, a million leg presses and a zillion repetitions on the exercise bike, just wearing away at the delicate tissues in there? Is that what it is?
The way we bodybuilders do things, we lock into these movements that we find effective, right? Which is great, which is true. You find this movement you like, this movement you like, this movement you like, and you do them repeatedly. So I've probably done 75 million leg extensions, right?
Right.
Think about that repetitive movement. If you don't mix it up and you do this in the same plane every time, there's going to be something grinding on something.
Right.
So that is over time. It's just it's pure. What's the word I'm looking for? The study of rocks and how they interact, like the study of
erosion.
Erosion. The study of how the Grand Canyon came to exist. Right. It's the same damn thing over time.
Right.
So, any little flaw in that movement, and when I say flaw, what I mean is something rubbing on something and wearing it away, even if it's to a minute degree, over 25 years. Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. So, and what happens with us bodybuilders is we get really tight. Let's say our outer quads, start to adhere, and we get really tight and we're moving in a way that's not natural. We don't ever get it released. We don't get any DMT. We don't get any ART. We don't get any of this therapy that could help release the muscle and put us in a better, more biomechanically advantageous situation. We don't ever do that. We just keep lifting, and we don't stretch, and we keep lifting, and our muscles move in these unnatural ways over time and wear a groove in this connective tissue. That's one thing. Then the other thing that's been proven is that anabolic steroids do, as one of their side effects, over time cause the degradation of connective tissue. We don't know why or how, what the mechanism is, but we know it's true.
The thing I always heard was, and it could be just an old wives' tale, is that the muscles get bigger, but the tendons and ligaments don't. And so you have the tendons and ligaments of a small, skinny guy pulling the muscles of a big guy. Does that make sense?
That would be bad enough if that were true, but it's even worse than that. It's even worse than that, because not only do the muscles get stronger, but the tendons don't stay the same. They actually get weaker.
Oh.
So you end up with stronger muscles and actually weaker, more, porous and volatile tendons that could go at any minute. Because, I mean, if you just look at what's happening around us, it makes perfect sense that that's the case.
Right.
I should be able to get out of a chair without that happening. I should be able to even fall backwards. You know what I mean?
Yeah, one would think.
You could probably have that same fall and not do that.
I don't. To tell you the truth, I've been so aware of my knees lately. Just thinking about what you've been through. And I was doing legs the other day, and I was like, no, I'm going to go lighter. I'm going to go a little bit lighter.
Dude, you can't be too cautious.
Well, that brings up another question I wanted to ask you. Let's say you're talking to a young person who's exercising. What kind of advice would you give them? And they want to be a bodybuilder, and they want to be a big bodybuilder. Is there any advice you could give somebody at a young age to kind of avoid this, other than saying, don't be a bodybuilder?
Yeah, one of the things you can do is mix up your movements so that you're not doing the same exact thing every single time. Even if it's just a matter of switching up the direction of the leg extension, or doing them one leg at a time, or moving your body in a different plane, or just mixing things up so that you're not just wearing that same groove over and over again. As far as the anabolics are concerned, there's nothing you can do about it. That's part of the sport. You have to do it. So it's something that's going to be just there and that you have to deal with. Longevity in this sport requires you to think outside the box sometimes, but there's no way of getting around the fact, like if you're a football player, you're going to end up crippled. You're a basketball player, dude, you wear your body out. It's just, you use it up. When you're a professional athlete, when you're striving to become a professional athlete, you are using your body in a way that A, wasn't really meant to, and B, that no one else is willing to. That's why you are who you are, where you are.
Right.
And then you pay the price at some point.
All right.
Hopefully the price isn't too hefty.
Well, hopefully you can get back to the way you were with the other leg on both legs.
I don't see why not. If I had just done my first walking lunge session, and I had someone holding my hand just to take some of my weight off, and plus I was scared as shit, but I had done 4 sets of body weight.
Yeah.
And, with the bad leg and with the then good leg.
Right.
So if I did that once, I guess I can do it again. It's just I feel myself at the beginning of such a long road.
The first time you didn't know what was coming, but now this time you do know, and I think that's worse sometimes.
Yeah, I didn't know what was coming the first time. You're right.
Right.
And I just went through it day by day. It's easier to take it day by day when you don't know what's coming.
Exactly.
I know what's coming now. And it's not pretty, and it's a long, hard road. And, even Steve, our cousin Steve, who's been through everything.
He's a powerlifter, strongman.
Yeah, and he's injured everything many times over. Even he said, dude, I went through that injury once. Mm-hmm. I can't imagine going through it again back to back. Well, he says that, I'm going through a lot here. But then I was talking to Dave Pulcinella the other day, and I didn't know this about Dave, but he had torn his right quad in 2013, retore it in 2014, and had it redone again in 2016.
I did not know that at all. Why didn't he not publicize that? We just kept it quiet?
I don't know. I guess maybe we just didn't hear it, but I mean, it's not secret. 3 times in the same knee. Now, I didn't get into it with him exactly how that happened. Like, did he re-tear it, or was only a part of it torn the first time, then he tore another part? I don't know. Right. But 3 times to go under the knife in the same knee in 3 years that's just overwhelming.
I can't imagine what that does to you psychologically.
And then he told me that Triple H, the wrestler, also did exactly what I did. He tore one and then he tore the other.
Oh my God! So it's not that uncommon.
Well, I'm definitely not alone in it.
Right. Well, I'm sure it's no comfort though.
Actually, it was. When I heard that, I was like, "Yeah, cool. You know what? Cool."
Really?
I'm not the only one. Fuck it.
Oh, okay. Well, listen, we had a bunch of topics that we were going to have you talk about, but we want to keep this podcast moving. We don't want like a 3-hour podcast like we guys used to do before. It's going to be short and sweet. So we're going to end this one here.
Okay.
Nice little catch up there. And we've got a bunch of other topics. So next week we'll get to the first of your topics, and we'll take care of that then.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, Dave. And finally, on the premiere episode of Voices of Bodybuilding, our off-topic article. This is an excerpt of a commencement speech given by the writer David Foster Wallace, which I think may hit home with many of you who obsess a little too much about your bodies. I'm a big fan of Wallace's funny, insightful essays, not so much his bloated novels, but he was an extremely sensitive person, and it came out in his exhaustively detailed writing. Maybe he was a little too sensitive because he ended up committing suicide at 46 years old, unfortunately. He wrote about death often, but never about the depression which finally killed him. This speech was given 3 years before his death to the Kenyon College class of 2005, and I really recommend you look up the full version, which is on YouTube. So I'm going to pick it up in the middle where he's talking to liberal arts students about the cliche about how liberal arts teaches you how to think. Learning how to think is what he's talking about here. Think of the old cliche about the mind being an excellent servant but a terrible master. This, like many cliches, so lame and unexciting on the surface, actually expresses a deep and terrible truth. It is not the least bit coincidental that adults who commit suicide with firearms almost always shoot themselves in the head. And the truth is that most of these suicides are actually dead long before they pull the trigger. And I submit that this is what the real, no-bull value of your liberal arts education is supposed to be about. How to keep from going through your comfortable, prosperous, respectable adult life dead, unconscious, a slave to your head and to your natural default setting of being uniquely, completely, imperially alone, day in and day out. Now that may sound like hyperbole or abstract nonsense, so let's get concrete. The plain fact is that you graduating seniors do not yet have any clue what day in, day out really means. There happens to be whole parts of American adult life that nobody talks about in commencement speeches. One such part involves boredom, routine, and petty frustration. The parents and older folks here will know all too well what I'm talking about. By way of example, let's say it's an average day, and you get up in the morning, go to your challenging job, and you work hard for 9 or 10 hours, and at the end of the day you're tired and you're stressed out, and all you want to do is go home and have a good supper and maybe unwind for a couple of hours, and then hit the sack early because you have to get up the next day and do it all again. But then you remember there's no food at home. You haven't had time to shop this week because of your challenging job. And so now after work you have to get in your car and drive to the supermarket. It's the end of the workday and the traffic's very bad. So getting to the store takes way longer than it should. And when you finally get there, the supermarket is very crowded. Because of course it's the time of day when all the other people with jobs also try to squeeze in some grocery shopping. And the store's hideously fluorescently lit and infused with soul-killing muzak or corporate pop, and it's pretty much the last place you want to be. But you can't just get in and quickly out. You have to wander all over the huge, overlit store's crowded aisles to find the stuff you want, and you have to maneuver your junky cart through all these other tired, hurried people with carts. And of course there are also the glacially slow old people, and the spacey people, and the ADHD kids who all block the aisle, and you have to grit your teeth and try to be polite as you ask them to let you by. And finally, eventually, you get all your supper supplies, except now it turns out there aren't enough checkout lanes open, even though it's the end of the day rush, so the checkout line is incredibly long, which is stupid and infuriating, but you can't take your fury out on the frantic lady working the register. Anyway, you finally get to the checkout line's front, and pay for your food, and wait to get your check or card authenticated by a machine, and then get told to have a nice day in a voice that is the absolute voice of death. And then you have to take your creepy, flimsy plastic bags of groceries in your cart through the crowded, bumpy, littery parking lot and try to load the bags in your car in such a way that everything doesn't fall out of the bags and roll around in the trunk on the way home. And then you have to drive all the way home through the slow, heavy, SUV-intensive rush hour traffic, etc., etc. The point is that petty, frustrating crap like this is exactly where the work of choosing comes in. Because the traffic jams and crowded aisles and long checkout lines give me time to think. And if I don't make a conscious decision about how to think and what to pay attention to, I'm going to be pissed and miserable every time I have to food shop. Because my natural default setting is the certainty that situations like this are really all about me, about my hungriness and my fatigue and my desire to just get home. And it's going to seem for all the world like everybody else is just in my way. And who are all these people in my way? And look how repulsive most of them are, and how stupid and cow-like and dead-eyed and non-human they seem here in the checkout line. Or at how annoying and rude it is that people are talking loudly on cell phones in the middle of the line, and look how deeply unfair this is. I've worked really hard all day, and I'm starved and tired, and I can't even get home to eat and unwind because of all these stupid, goddamned people. Look, if I choose to think this way, fine. Lots of us do. Except that thinking this way tends to be so easy and automatic. It doesn't have to be a choice. Thinking this way is my natural default setting. I can choose to force myself to consider the likelihood that everyone else in the supermarket's checkout line is just as bored and frustrated as I am, and that some of these people probably have much harder, more tedious or painful lives than I do, overall. Again, please don't think that I'm giving you moral advice, or that I'm saying you're supposed to think this way, or that anyone expects you to just automatically do it, because it's hard. It takes will and mental effort, and if you're like me, some days you won't be able to do it, or you just flat out won't want to. But most days, if you're aware enough to give yourself a choice, you can choose to look differently at this fat, dead-eyed, over-made-up lady who just screamed at her little child in the checkout line. Maybe she's not usually like this. Maybe she's been up 3 straight nights holding the hand of her husband who's dying of bone cancer. Or maybe this very lady is the low-wage clerk at the motor vehicles department who just yesterday helped your spouse resolve a nightmarish red tape problem through some small act of bureaucratic kindness. Of course, none of this is likely, but it's also not impossible. It just depends on what you want to consider. If you're automatically sure that you know what reality is, and who and what is really important, if you want to operate on your default setting, then you, like me, will not consider possibilities that aren't pointless and annoying. But if you've really learned how to think, how to pay attention, then you will know you have other options. It will actually be within your power to experience a crowded, loud, slow, consumer hell-type situation as not only meaningful, but sacred, on fire with the same force that lit the stars, compassion, love, the subsurface unity of all things. Not that that mystical stuff's necessarily true. The only thing that's capital T true is that you get to decide how you're going to try to see it. You get to consciously decide what has meaning and what doesn't. You get to decide what to worship. Because here's something else that's true. In the day-to-day trenches of adult life, there is actually no such thing as atheism. There is no such thing as not worshiping. Everybody worships. The only choice we get is what to worship. And an outstanding reason for choosing some sort of God or spiritual type thing to worship, be it JC or Allah, be it Yahweh or the Wiccan mother goddess of the Four Noble Truths or some infrangible set of ethical principles, is that pretty much anything else you worship will eat you alive. If you worship money and things, if they are where you tap real meaning in life, then you will never have enough. Never feel you have enough. It's the truth. Worship your own body and beauty and sexual allure, and you will always feel ugly. And when time and age start showing, you will die 1,000,000 deaths before they finally plant you. On one level, we all know this stuff already. It's been codified as myths, proverbs, cliches, bromides, epigrams, parables, the skeleton of every great story. The trick is keeping the truth up front in daily consciousness. Worship power, you will feel weak and afraid, and you will need ever more power over others to keep the fear at bay. Worship your intellect. Being seen as smart, you'll end up feeling stupid, a fraud, always on the verge of being found out, and so on. Look, the insidious thing about these forms of worship is not that they're evil or sinful. It's that they are unconscious. They are default settings. They're the kind of worship you just gradually slip into, day after day, getting more and more selective about what you see and how you measure value without ever being fully aware that that's what you're doing. And the world will not discourage you from operating on your default settings, because the world of men and money and power hums along quite nicely on the fuel of fear and contempt and frustration and craving and the worship of self. Our own present culture has harnessed these forces in ways that have yielded extraordinary wealth and comfort and personal freedom. The freedom to be lords of our own tiny skulled kingdoms, alone at the center of all creation. This kind of freedom has much to recommend it. But of course, there are all different kinds of freedom, and the kind that is most precious you will not hear much talked about in the great outside world of winning and achieving and displaying. The really important kind of freedom involves attention and awareness and discipline and effort, and being able truly to care about other people and to sacrifice for them over and over in myriad petty little unsexy ways every day. That is real freedom. The alternative is unconsciousness, the default setting, the rat race, the constant gnawing sense of having had and lost some infinite thing. And it is unimaginably hard to do this, to stay conscious and alive, day in, day out. It's kind of tough reading that part where he talks about suicide, knowing what he did later in life. It's kind of hard to hear that. But I do read this piece every so often, every year or so. I think that it has a lot of things in it that I need to remember. And he says them very well, not the least of which is to not be too attached to your physical body, because it will deteriorate. Even though those of us in the bodybuilding and fitness industry work to maintain our bodies, even more so because of that, the slow degradation of the human body is like 1,000,000 or 1,000 deaths, whatever he said there. So listening to this and listening to how to get out of that mind trap is important to me, and I refer back to this essay often. A lot of his other essays are a lot funnier than this. This is pretty heavy. There's one where he goes on a cruise ship, and it's really one of the most entertaining things I've ever read, and I've read that several times, and it's really long. I need to find an excerpt from that one to show you that David Foster Wallace can be really funny too. So that's our off-topic article for the premiere episode of Voices of Bodybuilding. I hope you got something out of that. Thanks for listening to Voices of Bodybuilding. Just a reminder that you can send me articles to be considered for this podcast at mike@mikepulcinella.com. They can be articles you find or pieces you write yourself. So till next time, stay active and stay healthy.